Welcome to the UIF Community Podcast. Before we get started, please keep in mind that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individual presenters and do not necessarily reflect UIF Corporation or its affiliates.
As-Salaam Alaikum and greetings, listeners. On today's episode, we'll be joined by attorney Furqan Muhammad of MST Law, based out of Chicago, Illinois. Furqan's journey through law school, corporate law, and private practice is truly inspiring, and he'll be sharing valuable insights and advice. We'll cover everything from navigating traffic accidents to the importance of wills and estate planning, plus some fascinating legal cases and book recommendations. I'm your host, Omar Subhani, VP of Sales at UIF, and I'm joined today by Ijaz Hussain, Executive Vice President of National Sales and Director at UIF. Before we get into our discussion with Furqan, I wanted Ijaz to share his thoughts on the past year as we close out 2024 and his outlook on the 2025 real estate market. Ijaz, please go ahead.
Thank you, Omar. As-Salaam Alaikum, everyone. And I want to wish all the listeners a very happy new year. This is our first podcast episode for 2025. And I'd like to wish all of you peace, good health, happiness, and prosperity in the year ahead and beyond. So, Umar, I'm very excited because this will be our 10th episode, and not including the one intro we did introducing ourselves. I kind of went back and looked at it rather than guessing this time around. And the first one for 2025. So I'm super excited about that. However, before I go into the 2025 outlook, I did want to thank a few parties because 2024 was truly an amazing year for UIF. And, all credit first and foremost to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing us. But after that, I'd like to, thank our customers, our employees, our teammates, our investors who choose to invest in our company financing programs, and in general, all our UIF stakeholders for another banner year. Just so much to be thankful for. And, we have become, in my mind, the best faith-based Islamic financing company in the country, mainly because of our employees' commitment to our customers in the form of customer service and just the community support. All the markets we serve, community has been hugely positive and supportive, and I can't thank everybody enough for that. Before I get into 2025, I just wanted to say, 2024 at UIF, not only did we achieve our strategic and financial goals, but besides retaining our crown as the number one home financing company, we continued our auto financing expansion by launching auto financing in Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and in this year, 2025, feel confident saying we'll be launching 4 or 5 more states, for the auto financing and also help our community with masjid and commercial real estate financing. But the place that I could really use our community's help, and it's a humble request, is we have raised millions in our through our savings accounts that we offer through University Bank. But I humbly request our community to continue supporting our financing programs and our efforts by opening a very simple savings account at University Bank. We get to utilize the funds for our financing programs, and then we share the profits in the form of dividends with our community members. So what better than having your hard-earned money invested in halal financing programs and then make a halal income based on what we do for our community. So that is my one request from the community, the listeners, that please consider opening. These are FDIC insured accounts, just like you'd open at any bank. UIF is not a bank. We are a private company, so we need to open an account at a banking institution. We use University Bank, who also happens to be a parent company, to utilize their services. So when customers open the account online, we get to use the funds to help our community. So please consider doing that. We offer a very competitive return, and you can use, on your savings accounts. And we also have some deposit accounts similar to CDs, but consider doing that. And lastly, Omar, I just want to say thanks to you for your effort, Farah, and our marketing team. Our podcast has been super successful since its launch mid-year 2024. Over 115,000 listeners who have listened to our various podcasts over the last 6 to 7 months. I consider that hugely successful. So thanks to the effort of our team, the podcast team, the amount of research we put into it, the preparation, the work that goes into it, I hope the community recognizes this. I tell people, hey, we're trying to invest in the community intelligence, collective community intelligence, by bringing on great book reviews, great speakers. And Furqan is one example today. He's going to bring his unique approach to his life lessons from an attorney perspective. But I know, Omar, you're working on many other guest speakers. And as the platform grows, we can invite speakers with wide-ranging experiences, so to speak. So Omar, that's kind of like my background on 2024. I'm going to turn to market outlook 2025. But Omar, before I get into that, do you have any particular thoughts about what I've covered so far?
No, I appreciate the shout out, Ijaz. It's really enjoyable to just do something different and new, and trying to provide different perspectives and voices to our community to listen to. We had some really cool episodes. If this may be the first time you're listening to our podcast, we had Fada Ali, who's a real estate investor, and she has a really, really cool story, and she has a book that she wrote as well about her real estate journey. And other guests that we've brought on have been excellent, and they brought in some great insight. So definitely check out those episodes if you haven't listened to those before, if this is the first one you're listening to. And like you said, Ijaz, 2025, we already got, potential guests lined up that we're really excited about. So we're going to be going in some slightly different directions as well, like, some former NBA players potentially, and, other like productivity gurus and things like that. So we're really trying to add value, bring benefit to our community, and, 2025, inshallah, will be even better.
Right. And, one of the things I talk about to our team is about doing good, being good, and we want to stay with that. I mean, our competitors, sometimes one of them specifically just believes in negativity, bad mouthing, doing what's in their best interest, regardless of the interests of the community or their customers. But for us, it's very big about, how do we operate? How can we do good? What can we do to make our community better, offer the best programs? And I'm very appreciative of being part of UIF and the team members that we have serving our community. So with that said, I'm just going to quickly turn to 2025 market outlook. But before I do that, 2024, a comment about just the real estate market's outlook in 2024 is very disappointing. 2024 came in, the great deal of optimism. The rates would go down quite a bit after a couple of years of very difficult, challenging housing markets, and rates would go down, and hopefully inventories rise, and it'll be a great year for the home financing industry. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Rates didn't go down much because the economy stayed pretty hot for the most part. Jobs, the employment reports that came out throughout the year, they remained strong. Housing inventory, people were just not moving. Everybody's sidelined because, I read a study by Chase Mortgage that put out 70% of homeowners have mortgage rates below 5%. And with 30-year mortgage rates currently still hovering around 7%, I mean, people have no incentive to move, those who already have homes. And affordability became a big issue because people who wanted to buy homes, especially the younger people who with family formations, who are getting married, and typically they are the ones who buy homes, entry-level startup homes, the inventory just wasn't there. So all in all, 2024 was, for the real estate housing industry, was a little bit of a disappointment, I would say. Where do we go from here? That's the question. So what I do normally is, besides looking at our own company data, I also follow reports that come out of Zillow, Redfin. These are obviously the biggest real estate companies, and also National Association of Realtors. They put out a report. I read their reports, including listening to conference calls by CEOs of companies like Rocket Mortgage and UWM and Loan Depot. It gives me a perspective on what they're saying and what their CEOs are seeing. So the thoughts I'm going to share today are not just my personal thoughts looking at our own company data, but also some of the information that I have gleaned over from other third-party sources. So in essence, for people who are not very familiar with housing markets, 4 factors impact housing markets. One is mortgage rates, which is pretty clear. If the rates go up, things slow down. Rates go down, market picks up. That's one. Housing inventory, how many homes are coming to the market, right? Existing homes. New build construction happens, but existing homes is a big part of the inventory. Third is economic conditions, things like jobs data, whether the jobs are increasing or falling. Inflation reports, inflation is going up or down. GDP growth, gross domestic product growth, whether the economy is growing or the economy is slowing. And finally, political considerations. We had a big election. Mr. Trump has come into the office again, and his policies will dictate a lot where the rates go and where the housing markets go, and so on and so forth. So just in a nutshell, what is the rate outlook, right? The rate outlook is very uncertain. And I've been in the business for 25 years almost in this housing industry. And if you add another 7 to 8 years in the investments, working with my background in working with investment firms and so forth, 30 years plus, I've never seen a year where we're going in with more uncertain outlook when it comes to mortgage rates, because there are so many cross currents that are flowing back and forth that it's very, very difficult to say. A lot will depend on whether we go into recession, because you've had a very strong economic growth last few years. Chances are, hey, things could turn around. Jobs, more employers will start laying off people because of improved productivity through technology and so forth, and AI is a big part of that. So people don't need as many employees. So if the job numbers start weakening, the rates could improve because the economy is going to go south. If the economy stays red hot, then yeah, that'll be a challenge. So the rate outlook is very, very uncertain, and most experts are predicting that it'll be ebb and flow. So you'll have times that rates will go up, you'll have times when rates will go down. We're hoping at UIF that the rates steadily go south, especially during the buying season, second quarter, third quarter. Otherwise, it makes it for another very challenging home financing market for us as well. So rates will ebb and flow, but nobody, at least the experts I've read, don't feel the rates are going to go too far high up. But again, experts are known to be wrong as well. So we always take the approach that we have to adapt to whatever market conditions are, because we're not in the predicting business, we're in the adapting business. So rates are going to be up and down, but will not end much different than where we stand today. Housing inventory, that's a big part of the discussion. Every expert I've listened to or read, they all expect the housing inventory to improve, because at some point in time, people have to move. There's housing formations. There's demographic. People move from geographically from one markets to the other markets. So all of that is going to come into play, and inventory is going to rise. So that'll be good. Markets are going to move from seller's market over more to the buyer's market. One thing that Redfin CEO pointed out, there'll be a lot of people embracing small home living. He said the term cozy, in quotes, the term cozy is appearing more and more in listings. And this may be because of affordability. People just can't afford to buy bigger homes, so they have to buy smaller homes. Or it could just be a changing of the mindset. Back 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, everybody wanted to get a bigger and bigger and bigger home. And now that's changing too. People are like, why do we need so much home space? We don't. That just increases your taxes, increases your expenses. So that might be the case as well. One note on condo pricing I read, big cities, and I know I live in Chicago, and I know for a fact, talking to people, the condo prices in the city of Chicago and other places have been dropping after the pandemic, because people were moving out of these big cities for many reasons, and moving to the suburbs and so forth. That is finally going to stabilize, and we're going to see some improved pricing, stabilization in the beginning, and then improvement maybe down the road. Word on home builders, very optimistic because of loosening regulatory standards. Republicans typically, when they come in, they usually they loosen the regulatory standards so people can quickly apply for more permits and get and on and on. So that's going to be a positive. However, builders have been talking about these tariffs are very concerning if Trump really puts them into place, because that's going to lead to more expensive products that are used in the construction of homes. And then you have labor shortages, because if people start getting deported and people leave this country, especially in the areas where they are involved in the home building industry, then that puts a lot of pressure on the home builders for building more homes. So that's sort of the home builders. They're optimistic in one way, they're pessimistic in the other. But my view, looking at all of this and just seeing where we sit today, 2025, will be a challenging year for the most part. In 2024, the expectation was about 4 million homes will be sold. The final numbers are still coming out. So 4 million homes sold in 2024. That number seems to go up to maybe 4.25, 4.3 million in 2025, based on the industry expert predictions, for whatever that's worth. The question I always get when people, hey, is it a good time to buy my house? My answer always is the same. If it's your primary home you're buying, do not delay, if you plan on living there 5 years or longer, because over a period of time, home values go up or down. When you look to buy your primary home, you should think what's best for you and your family, school districts, the area, because you're enjoying the home. This is not an investment. This is something that you're going to enjoy. Pick an area you want to live in, good school district, because eventually home prices will rise, even if they take a dip temporarily. But you can't delay that, because delaying that is just paying rent, unnecessarily wasting money, in my humble opinion. So my view is always, hey, primary home, buy. Investment properties, be more skeptical, and be more careful, because you may have better opportunities to buy investment properties maybe later on. So Omar, with that said, let's turn to our featured speaker, and let's move on.
All right, Ajaz. So why did we decide to invite our attorney friend Furqan Muhammad as our featured speaker today?
Well, Omar, as you know, we created this podcast to add value to our listeners' lives, be it reviewing the best business books we have read, or interviewing interesting speakers. So as part of this mission, we've invited guest speakers in the past who spoke on topics of real estate, cryptocurrencies, etc. And today, it's a friend of mine who I've known for a while in the Chicago area, attorney Furqan Muhammad. It's his turn to enlighten us with his knowledge and experience in the field of law. I have known Furqan for years now. We live in the Chicagoland area. I've seen firsthand Furqan's contributions to our local communities here. I'll let Furqan discuss his background, but all I want to say is Furqan is a very successful attorney. He's a founder of his own law firm, MST Law. He's a community activist, he's a humanitarian, and just an all-around great guy. Many people talk a big game when it comes to community service, but Furqan actually delivers. And I'm very excited personally to hear his thoughts on the various topics we have on the agenda today. So with that said, Omar, I'll let you lead off, so please go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Ajaz. So Furqan, can you share some insights on your journey through law school, corporate law, and then eventually you going into private practice on your own? So kind of our guests can understand your background and your history.
Sure. So first and foremost, thank you both for having me. Alaikum, Omar and Ajaz. It's nice to see you both again. What Ajaz, I think, forgot to mention is that this is a culmination of a lot of failed attempts between Ajaz and I to get together for coffee. And now we're finally getting to get together in front of the whole world to catch up. So alhamdulillah for that. Thank you guys for having me. As far as law school is concerned, so my path is a little unique in some ways. When I graduated college, I wouldn't say I was 100% set on law school. A lot of people will say, I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, etc. That was not my story at all. And to the contrary, I was thinking about becoming a teacher at a high school. And I actually did it for a couple of years through college, and just it didn't just sit right for me as a full-time endeavor. And so one of the kids that I used to coach, I was a basketball coach, a cross-country coach, a track coach. One of the kids that I was coaching, his mom was a lawyer. And I remember kind of asking her questions about her practice. And she said, oh, why don't you come shadow me? I'll take you to court. I'll take you to, experience law. And I kind of shadowed her for a couple of days and just absolutely fell in love with it. And so I kind of pivoted a bit my junior year of college, ended up taking the LSAT. I graduated from Loyola University, Chicago in 2008, and I graduated from Loyola University Law School in 2011. And alhamdulillah, for me, it wasn't necessarily the best time to graduate from law school, but I was fortunate to have done really well in law school, graduated at the top of my class, and I was one of the few lucky ones, alhamdulillah, to get a job offer even before graduation at a top firm, international firm, where I focused on commercial and business litigation. So that was from 2011, 2012 to about 2017. For about 5 years, I was working at a law firm downtown as a commercial litigator. And then from there, spending 5 years in big law, I kind of, every year was kind of a self-assessment. And I think we all kind of recommend that young professionals, every professional, take self-accounting every year, if not sooner, to evaluate what they want from their career, what they want from their profession, what they want from their life. And every year I would do this analysis internally, kind of like a self-eval. And I found kind of my interest and my passion starting to kind of lie elsewhere. And, what I realized from my experience in big law was that there's essentially, three types of attorneys in these firms. And I think Ijaz can probably relate to this because it's a repeating pattern in other industries as well. But essentially, there's attorneys that find the clients, there's attorneys that manage cases, and then there's kind of the associates that do the work, right? And what I started to realize every year that I got a little more senior is that the people who were the most satisfied with their career were the ones who were driving the clients, right? They were originating the clients, they were managing the clients, they were developing the strategy for the clients, not necessarily the other folks. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but that's generally what I started seeing. And what I realized is that's what I wanted to do. And there's a common saying, and in 2017, I guess, to finish that side of it, 2017, I launched my own law firm and I've been there ever since. But the common driving factor for me is that there's a saying that in niches, there are riches, all right? So in niches or niches, there are riches, meaning if you're known for something, it develops its own kind of business development, right? If you're the go-to guy for something, people will find you as opposed to you having to find your own clients. So there were certain attorneys at the firm. There was a patent litigator who was very well known for certain technologies. There was a casino attorney, right? She was the go-to person for anyone looking to do casino work. There was a individual who was known as the hotels guy, right? Those are the people that I found to be the most satisfied with their legal career. And a lot of it was just that they were so good in their particular niche that they were some of the most successful attorneys I saw. And when I launched my own firm, I kind of went in with that mentality that I wanted to be known for something. And then if you fast forward to today, there's essentially 3 different practice areas that I have become a go-to person in the Chicagoland area, if not broader. One of them is taxi medallions. Number 2 is Islamic estate planning. And number 3 now, most recently, and probably the one that's taken over essentially all of my time, is personal injury, wrongful death, medical malpractice, kind of the catastrophic injuries. So those are the 3 practice areas that, alhamdulillah, I've built a good, knowledge base about, but also built kind of the niche recognition in.
So Furqan, just want to ask you, so coincidentally, you mentioned 2011, you graduated law school. That's funny enough, it's actually when I graduated law school as well from University of Miami, but I took a totally different route. I never ended up practicing law myself. But can you give a little bit of background for those, I guess, like younger people who are thinking about law, maybe are in undergrad or working right now, what they can kind of expect on a, like, as they start a career in law, like what their day might look like?
Sure. So I think I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of students at different levels. I actually taught Introduction to Law at Loyola University for freshmen and sophomore students. I teach currently actually Introduction to Law for high school students at a couple of the Islamic schools in the Chicagoland area. And a lot of people will come to me with a preconceived notion about law. And the first question I have to ask them, the advice I always give them is, why do you want to pursue law? A lot of times the answers I get when you kind of dig under the surface are not necessarily very good reasons, right? Number one is, the most prevalent is, I think I'm going to enjoy it. But they don't really know what it entails because they've never actually experienced it. They've never shadowed somebody. They've never been immersed in it. They've never, seen it or worked at a law firm, et cetera. But they have these romanticized ideas about law from TV shows, right? I'm sure you guys have seen some of those TV shows as well. A lot of people will tell me, I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer as a kid because I like to argue. that's not a good reason. Actually, law is a lot less about arguing on your feet and a lot more about research and analyzing facts to develop, influential briefs, right, to convince the judges. So
Right.
a lot of what law is not what people think it is. So I always tell people the best advice I try to give people is immerse yourself in some way or another. And 2011, Omar, when you graduated law school, we're thinking about law school. These things didn't exist as prevalent as, or at least they're not as prevalent as they are now. There's a lot of different opportunities you can have: internships, working at law firms, finding attorneys, getting coffee with them. LinkedIn is a great tool. So I tell people, if you're truly interested in law, make sure that you confirm that is the right thing for you, and that's the only way to do it, is to gain the experience. So a lot of folks, I'll kind of teach them, give them a crash course about LinkedIn, for example, or how to find local lawyers that you can maybe talk to, how to find Muslim lawyers that you can talk to if you're Muslim, how to just find some ways to gain exposure. So that's the number one advice I give to high school and college students. And again, it didn't really exist back when we were there. I was fortunate to have that opportunity to shadow somebody. But now I think there's no excuse not to have some kind of immersion or experience.
So the funny thing is, I didn't run into you back then, Furqan, but I actually took my LSAT and I actually applied for law school locally in Chicago, and I got admitted. And my reasoning really was, I love Law and Order as a TV show back then.
Right.
The suits they used to wear. So I'm like, I think I can make a really good, really cool lawyer. But then when I went through the LSAT process and I talked to some people afterwards, then I realized, I'm like, man, I'm so not a lawyer. So unlike the two of you who actually took the journey and went through law school, I actually stopped right in the beginning stages itself and said, I'm going to divert and go into more of the business career. And I think for me personally, it was a very good decision that I made personally. Furqan, the question I wanted to ask you is, we have a lot of younger people who listen to our podcast, who are buying homes and cars and who come to us. So they're a big swath of our listeners here. One thing people ask me, so what are some things you look for somebody when you're hiring, or someone, successful traits that you think people should develop to become next level successful, separate yourself from the pack, if you will. And I usually tell them, 3 things come to mind right off the bat. Something like hard work. You have to be hardworking because everybody is reasonably intelligent, if you in your chosen career field. You have to have that differentiating is you have to work harder than others. Number 2, I said integrity is very, very important. Where without that, you expose yourself and you never will be successful in the long run because people recognize you for who you are. So having that next level integrity is very important. And finally, I talk about empathy because it's something I think is sorely lacking in the corporate world, whether it's business or it's law, whatever, where people are not empathetic toward each other. And at UIF especially, we are very big about that. And people we hire, we bring on our teammates, we really are big about empathy. Do what's best for others, right? Do good, be good is our mantra. So is there anything other than these 3 that comes to your mind that you would advise some younger people who are starting to just starting on their career path right now?
So those are, honestly, I would echo a lot of what you said, Ejaz. If you had asked me kind of to give 3 traits, I think those are, you hit the nail on the head. Those are definitely 3 of them. I would say people today, especially the younger generation, is born in a day and age of social media. I think communication is changing, but we're slowly losing the ability to analyze issues on a deeper level. A lot of what we are fed today are snippets, right? Little clips, TikTok images, small videos, and that's kind of how we digest information. But we're slowly starting to lose that ability to analyze issues on an objective level, on a deeper level, to analyze and combine facts, to kind of grapple with some of the difficult questions we have, instead of being kind of very much one-sided or single track minded. So I think a lot of people take a step back, make sure you're looking at the whole picture, make sure you're looking at facts on both sides, make sure you're making the right evaluation or the right decision based on a totality of all the evidence and circumstances there are. And that's a big part of what we do in law, right? As we take on cases, we do a lot of this. Secondly, I would tell people, kind of going back to my point about my own career, every year I do a self-evaluation of what I want to gain for the upcoming year. Am I satisfied with where I am? How can I naturally build the next level? And I think a lot of people, they're kind of on a hamster wheel, right? They spin faster and faster and faster, but they're not going anywhere. And I think at some point it just kind of catches up with you and you're exhausted rather than working, not just working harder, but I think working smarter is a key element of that as well.
Sure. Let's turn quickly, Furqan. I will have a lot of items I want to cover with you. We're short on time here today. We keep this to typically an hour, but I could talk to you for 10 hours straight.
Right.
But let's talk about some of the areas of specialty that you have focused on, and I'm more so I'm viewing it from the lens of the listeners here. Importance of wills and estate planning. I know you and I have talked about maybe potentially even doing a seminar on this topic for the community in general. So if you could first do a little bit of a macro discussion on the importance of wills and estate planning, and maybe if then you want to add, because we have primarily a very big Muslim audience, obviously because of the service we provide, something maybe specifics to do with that. So if you want to touch upon that area of expertise, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. So this is actually a very interesting time, Ijaz. This is the first time, I think, where Muslims who immigrated here in the 70s, 80s, we're seeing them pass away, right? Estate planning has never been a central focus of our community because the first generation that immigrated here never really had those ideas in mind because it's not something that existed back home, right? In Pakistan, India, the Middle East, estate planning is not really a comprehensive concept that it is here. And estate planning is essentially, so now as we're seeing these people kind of pass away, their families are starting to realize the importance of what the estate plan could have done for them, right? And they're finding themselves more and more stuck in this place called probate court, trying to get assets out of the deceased person's names into the names of the heirs. And it's a very messy, expensive, time-consuming process, a lot of which can be avoided if people put together the right estate plan. And on a macro level, estate planning is accounting for and having a game plan for everything you owe and everything you own, right? Everything you owe, everything you own. So what we do in the estate planning process is take account of every single asset that you have and then decide and discuss how best to transfer those and how, the vehicles to transfer them. So if somebody owns a house, right, they own investment properties, they own cars, they have bank accounts, they have retirement accounts. There's a separate process for how these things transfer that we need to make sure that we have the right paperwork in place to make those transfer upon a person's death. If somebody does it right, it's the most seamless and effective way to get everything to move on. If somebody doesn't have it, it's basically this terrible process that the family has to go through to get these assets out and get them moving. So what we do in that estate planning is look at it from two different perspectives, right? And not a lot of firms can do this. There's maybe a handful of firms that do this nationally, but we want to take stock of everything from a secular perspective, right? From the domestic rules of estate planning and tax, et cetera, and also look at it from the Islamic lens, because unlike other religions, Islam is very particular about how assets need to be distributed. So there's fixed shares, there's shares that are discretionary, there's portions that are mandatory. There are certain rules about how much and how to transfer those things to the Islamic heirs. So, we deal on it from both levels.
Furqan, when I hear the word estate planning, I feel it's more for people who have worked their lives, accumulated a sizable nest egg, if you will, and now they're concerned about the disposition and tax strategies and so forth. What about younger people who are getting married, are buying their first home, first car? Where would you ask them to start? I would imagine like a simple will or something, but I would like you to share, like at least at the basic level, where they start, and then eventually maybe get into more in-depth planning, if you will. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
My advice to people who are, just starting their process of accumulating wealth, building a family, building their place in the world, I always tell them, look, you don't know what you don't know. The best thing you can do is get an initial consultation with an attorney who's licensed to practice law in your state, and ideally has an estate planning background. You want to speak to them about what the process is like in their particular home state. And for most people that are just starting out, it might just be a simple will, like you mentioned, Ijaz. But as they continue to accumulate wealth, the estate plans, like their families, like their net worths, they evolve over time, and we continue adding. So we've had clients, for example, that started out as a young couple right after they got married, and now they're 10 years in, they've accumulated considerable wealth. The will that we started with, it's now evolved into a revocable trust with a lot of bells and whistles that they wanted along the way. And every few years, they're back to us. They're back in our office, updating their estate planning, letting us know what's changed, what assets they've added, what assets they've disposed of. And we continue to build the estate plan that complies with their Islamic requirements, as well as what's best for them from a secular perspective.
Got it. Let's turn, Furqan, to your other area expertise. I know you talked about, you do a lot of work in the area of personal injury, other areas, but the traffic violations is something I know you also specialize in. Can you talk a little bit about that? If somebody gets in an accident or something, how should one proceed?
Yeah,
so on that, please.
Like I mentioned earlier, the three practice areas we really specialize in is the Islamic estate planning, personal injury, which a lot of times is the car accidents that you're referring to, and taxi medallions was the third one. But to get into the personal injury, I've had accidents across the spectrum, and it's the bread and butter of my practice. Car accident, somebody's rear-ended, somebody breaks a red light and hits our client in a T-bone, whatever the case might be. The best advice I tell people is look, you really need to invest in a dash cam. That's the number one advice I give to people, because there's so many accidents that I see personally with my clients where our client says it's not their fault. Unfortunately, the police either didn't believe them or the facts didn't really line up in their story. But every so often we're able to find a business camera, a Ring camera at a residence, something that shows the accident on the back end. But a lot of times I tell the clients, if you had invested in a dash cam, and maybe it's just something like $100 or $150, if you invest in a dash cam, it's something that's always there for you to protect you in the instance of an accident where the other driver is saying it's your fault, or one or two of the facts don't line up, or for whatever reason, the police believes the other person. And sometimes, especially in our community where English may not be the first language, I oftentimes see law enforcement authorities kind of swayed by somebody who might be more well-spoken or more fluent in English, for example. So, that's my advice always to people involved in car accidents. Before you have an accident, obviously, invest in a dash cam, make sure you protect yourself.
Yeah, and Furqan, I quickly Googled that. That's really great advice. These things are pretty cheap to get now, right? Like you're saying about like $100 or maybe a little bit more or even less than that.
Right. If you just do a quick Amazon search, I think the one that most of my Uber and Lyft drivers get is maybe around $100, $150. It gives you app access, right? So you can see camera footage on your phone. I've actually literally had clients on the scene. The police will talk to them and they'll say, well, this person said you broke the red light. Nope, officer, here's the dash cam video right on my phone, right? I mean, it just completely changes the game. It doesn't really matter what the other person says or how well spoken they are, or the story they concoct. At the end of the day, pictures speak 1,000 words, and we're able to get the right outcome for the client and then the right settlement for the client, because we're not stuck in a fight over liability and he said, she said.
Okay, that's fantastic. And you were mentioning, Furqan, about your clients who are Uber drivers, right? So I kind of want to transition to a very famous case that you worked on that was in the news. Can you talk to us about the medallion case that you handled?
I think I mentioned in 2017 when I launched my own law firm, part of the driving force behind it was I was involved with a lot of the taxi drivers, just advising them and guiding them on these taxi medallion loans. So if you're in a big city and you don't know, or you're not, and you don't know, a taxi medallion is basically a license to drive or operate a taxi, right? So for many years, you maybe have seen the news, especially you, Ajaz, because you keep up on the markets. A taxi medallion was indicated to be one of the best performing assets of the last 20 years. What we know now is that it was all kind of propped up like a house of cards by a certain number of very influential and wealthy taxi medallion investors, medallion lenders, right? And then in a little before 2017, Uber basically came into town and flooded the markets with these cheap subsidized rides. and all these taxi medallions that people had invested. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who fell prey to this were people in our community, South Asian, Middle Eastern, different ethnic communities from Africa. They purchased these medallions. They basically financed them. At their peak, a New York medallion was valued at 1.3 million. A city of Chicago medallion peaked at about 350,000. And then, again, like we know now, that was due to some lenders who would place these outrageous bids for these medallions to prop up the values. But when Uber came and they had essentially competition, right, with subsidized rides, these taxi medallions just kind of plummeted in value. But the problem was all of these taxi drivers signed up on these commercial loans with personal guarantees and a lot of other very unsavory language that went against the debtor. So as soon as I launched my firm, I started representing a lot of these taxi drivers. We defended them in court in foreclosure proceedings. We filed bankruptcy for them. We renegotiated the debt. We did a lump sum settlement wherever possible. We worked out creative solutions to help these folks, whenever possible, keep their medallions so they could keep driving because it was their livelihood, but also get out from the debt underneath them. And so this was covered by the New York Times, actually. So if you look at, they won a Pulitzer Prize, alhamdulillah, it's one of the I guess, the highlights of my career so far. I was featured on that New York Times expose that eventually won the Pulitzer Prize. But I helped them kind of understand the Chicago market and kind of gave them the resources they needed to be able to crack that story in Chicago.
Yeah, and I'm very familiar with these cases. A lot of these customers who were actually cab drivers also had financed homes with companies like ours, et cetera. So they would always talk to me about these cases. Furqan, the other case I wanted you to touch upon, which is also close to my heart here, because I know some of the parties involved here, is the Sania Khan case, a very high-profile case, the murder of a social media personality, Sania Khan. So I know there's some you'll have some privacy concerns because it's an active case going on. But whatever you want to share for the audience, like what's the background about the case?
Sure. So I am one of the attorneys representing Sania Khan in the case, and for those who don't know, Sania Khan is a young professional who was married and then moved to Chicago. And then in July 2022, she was tragically murdered by her estranged husband, Raheel, who had driven all the way from Georgia to Chicago. Now, what a lot of people don't know are the facts that led up to that murder, which is that 6 months prior to that, in December 2021, she had had a very serious domestic violence issue with Raheel, where he had a mental breakdown, essentially tried to jump out of their 27th floor window together, forcing her out. And thankfully, the police and the mental health experts were able to stop that episode, and they essentially took him out. But in the months leading up to that is where Sania Khan became a lot more publicized and well-known, because she started kind of TikTok documenting everything that was going on. So in the months after that serious incident, she changed the locks. She notified the building, the condo building, which is one of the biggest and largest and well-known condo buildings in the city of Chicago. And what we know now is that in July 2022, Raheel was able to get into the building again, notwithstanding all the different things that she had tried to do to avoid this scenario. He walks in and basically murders her. What we know also now is that the way that happened is he had contacted a realtor, and you can see from the video surveillance that we have, and we obviously have filed a lawsuit in the city of Chicago. There's actually a very interesting HBO documentary. I believe it's called TikTok Murders, but I forget the exact name of the documentary. But essentially, he makes an appointment with a realtor, glides past the security desk. No one stops him. No one asks him anything. And he meets the realtor, goes up into the secure residential area, and sees one condo building, and then tells the realtor, hey, I think I've seen enough. I'm going to go visit a friend in the building. And she lets him basically walk away from there. Again, no follow-up with the building, no check-in with the building, no contacting any residences to see who his friend is that he was allegedly there to see. And he basically, the video surveillance shows that he enters the elevator and goes up to that residence, and the rest is history. So, a couple of takeaway points, I guess, from my side. One, whenever I have a family approach me with a catastrophic injury, it just kind of reminds me of the unique place that I have as a a wrongful death attorney, somebody who works in the civil space. And alhamdulillah, it's a very humble and honored place to be able to work with people and work with families in these types of tragic incidences in our community. But it also exposes me to a lot in terms of what the community is facing, right? So there's a lot of takeaways from Sania Khan's kind of episode. Everything from gender-based violence to the way our community responds, the lack of resources that our community has to address mental health, to address issues of divorce, and to essentially empower people and empower victims and empower people that are going through it, so that they don't feel alone, they don't feel isolated, and to help protect them in those kinds of scenarios. So, when a lot of people come to me, it's not that they're necessarily seeking anything but answers. So when the family approached me, it was more about what happened here. How did this happen, right? So from a criminal perspective, it's a very cut and dry case, right? It's a murder, and then Raheel commits suicide. He shoots himself in the same building before the police can get in. But where that criminal investigation ends, that's where we start as civil attorneys. We want to know how it happened, why it happened, and what steps and what things could have been done to avoid this kind of tragic incident. So everything from what we see in our world as civil attorneys is that many of the everyday changes we see related to product redesigns, quality control, safety, recalls, those are all kind of stemming oftentimes from civil cases that are brought by attorneys. So we do the best we can to give the family the answers that they're seeking in terms of what happened and how it happened, but also to effect change. Condo buildings need to have better security.
The thing, Furqan, is this actually case touched me. Not only did some people I know knew Sani on a personal level, but also when I bought the property in Chicago, I bought a condo in one of the high rises over the summer as a second home. And one of the realtors actually when I was there waiting for the attorney to come, she made a case, ever since, I don't know if you heard about this murder took place, the safety rules and the security rules all these buildings have put into change have also been upgraded, where now you cannot go into the building unless a realtor is present, and then realtor has to walk you back out again all the way. They cannot just let you wander around. So some changes, obviously, because of this case, have gone into effect, and I'm sure high rises all across the United States probably have now taken note and made their changes as well.
And that's one of our objectives here, is to put into place some enhanced security features for people in these buildings who, in large part purchase residences in these units, in these buildings, because they want some kind of safety from the condo buildings. It's one of the benefits of being there.
True.
Yeah. So, Furqan, I know, just kind of transitioning here, you're also an avid reader, as Ijaz is, and just want to close the show with your book recommendations, starting a new year, 2025, and share with the audience kind of what you're reading or what you have read recently that may have had a profound impact on you, and maybe that will benefit our readers, heading into the new year.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Omar. Obviously, there's a lot of books that I wish I could recommend, but for the sake of time, I'll kind of start with one book that I thought had a very profound impact on me in 2024, which is a book called Super Communicators. And if we all think about what we do on a day-to-day basis, a lot of us are in the business of talking to people, of communicating with people, but I don't feel like we all, myself included, take the time to really hone that skill. We kind of do it on the fly. We do it so much, we think we're experts at it, but in reality, we're not. And Super Communicators really opened my eyes to how communications or how conversations develop, how they evolve, what's a good conversation, what's a bad conversation, what kind of people, for example, Umar and Ijaz, I'm sure you guys have somebody that you turn to whenever you want to have a good conversation, right? Somebody to listen to you, somebody to help in certain ways. But everybody has a go-to person that they love communicating with, right? Love having conversations with. That's probably your super communicator, your quote-unquote super communicator. And it turns out that these super communicators tend to be that go-to person for a lot of people, and they have certain skills that they're not born with these communication skills, but it's something that can be learned. It's something that can be taught in terms of how to have the most meaningful and impactful conversation.
The book Furqan recommended is called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. He highly recommends reading. What I did want to mention is I was going to say a book I read, and I think I even shared with our team at UIF. I found that very impactful to me, and the book was called What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. By Mark McCormack. Mark is actually the founder of IMG Sports, which is the largest sports management agency. And what I loved about the book, piggybacking on Furqan's comments, it does talk a lot about communication, but more so, the book provides insights and practical tips to succeed in the business world and in your daily life, so to speak. So valuable lessons on effective communication techniques, forging connections, building relationships, but mostly using common sense to win in everyday life, and skills that he says are not taught in the business school. As a matter of fact, the book actually starts off by saying what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School is what they can't teach you at Harvard Business School. These are the soft skills we need to succeed. So I highly recommend that book for the audience as well, if you want to add that to your reading list besides the book Furqan recommended. Omar, if you just want to wrap up today's session by providing a little bit of Furqan's contact information. And again, as always, Omar, thank you for moderating and putting together these excellent podcasts for us.
Absolutely, Jaz. And thank you so much, Furqan, for joining our show today. And for our audience, you can reach Furqan of MST Law at F Mohammed. That's FMOHAMMED at mstlawfirm.com. And the website address is www.mstlawfirm.com. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the UIF Community Podcast. We really hope you found today's discussion to be insightful and inspiring. And don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this podcast with others in the community. Really appreciate it. And please check out our website at myuif.com for more information on our Islamic financing and savings accounts programs. Until next time, everyone, this is Omar Sabani signing off. As-Salaam Alaikum, and take care.